Paper 2, Core Vocabulary. Today we're looking at the changing UK economy. So as with all these videos, there is a vocabulary worksheet which you can pick up from your geography teacher, or you can just print this version off. I'd recommend that you have a go at defining these words first, so write down what they mean, and then use this video afterwards to correct them if you got them wrong, or tick them if you got them right. So, the UK economy, what do we mean by the UK economy? Well, it's the total value of all the goods and services that is made by businesses, but also workers through tax in the UK, and the sum or total of all that money, well, that's the UK economy. Employment patterns. When we're talking about employment patterns, we're talking about the type of job that people do, whether they're working in the primary, secondary, tertiary or quaternary sector. And what we see generally is in poorer countries, or in HICs long time ago, people working in the primary and secondary sector, but in HICs generally, most people work in the tertiary and quaternary sectors. Regional economic growth, nice and simple. So regional, we're thinking about regions, economic, we're thinking about money, and growth, thinking about increasing that money. So regional economic growth is where one region of the country produces more money. So for example, if we have a look for overall the UK, we've seen about 0.5% of growth, whereas most of that growth has been in London, which is nearly at 2%, whereas if you live in somewhere like the East Midlands, we're actually declining. But growth is the aim, regional economic growth. To help you remember, you can always think of my Uncle Reg. He's normally wearing a Gucci tracksuit, but Reg stands for regional economic growth. Okay, economic change. Economic change is just when a country or place changes how it makes money. So for example, before the Industrial Revolution, most of the UK's money was made through agriculture. Then in the Industrial Revolution, it was made through manufacturing, but now it's mainly made through the service sector, the tertiary sector. Deindustrialization. Simple way of putting it is it's the closing of factories, so a country stopping manufacturing products. Traditional industry base, we're thinking about primary activities such as coal mining and mineral extraction, as well as manufacturing in factories. Globalization. This is the spread of ideas, products, businesses around the world. So for example, McDonald's started off in America, but now you can find one in pretty much every country in the world. So it's a business that has spread around the world, but it's not just businesses that can spread. So for example, football as a sport, football started off again in the UK, but it has now become globalized. It's spread around the world and more people are playing it every day. Government policy. So these are a plan or set of rules given by a government to achieve an aim. Famously in relation to the change in UK economy, Margaret Thatcher in the 1970s and 1980s made lots of government policies. Some of the biggest ones in terms of the economy was that she reduced incentives for manufacturing and producing goods in the UK, which made it cheaper and more attractive to import those products from NEEs like China, where they can be cheaply made. She also carried out a process called privatisation, where instead of being services such as gas and rail transport being run by the government, they're run by private companies, hence privatisation. A post-industrial base, so post means after, industrial meaning factories. That's when a country makes more of its money in the tertiary sector, the service sector, after its industrial revolution has ended. Information technology is the increasing use of computers, but also in the modern day, phones and technology to send or store information, and the UK is a world leader in information technology. Service industries, also known as the tertiary sector, are the part of the economy that provide services for people. So think doctors, nurses, teachers, but even people serving in hospitality, people serving burgers in TGIs. Finance is anything to do with money. It could be large amounts of money, so the government finances, or it could be personal finances, so just looking after your own money. Research, so that's part of the quaternary sector of industry. So 60,000 people are employed in scientists or researchers in some kind of way, generally improving products or finding or making new ideas. Science parks. So science parks and business parks are clusters of businesses, groups of businesses that work together. So a science park is a group of scientific businesses, so involved in the quaternary or research centre, but they're situated on a local site all together so they can work together to improve regional economic growth. Remember my Uncle Reg. Business parks, very similar, but these are just groups of general businesses, a cluster of businesses that are grouped together so that they can work together and be centrally located so that they can make more regional economic growth at a faster rate. This example is Birmingham Business Park, and as you can see, here's the business park, but it is located next to the M42 motorway so that deliveries for imports and exports can be as fast as possible. It's also located next to the International Railway Station and the International Airport. Again, for imports and exports to happen as efficiently as possible, but also so that access to the site is easier, and that improved accessibility means that people are attracted to invest in businesses in the business park. The physical environment is everything around us in terms of natural features, so thinking of nature, air, trees, vegetation and water. So industry is a type of job that people do. For example, people work in the tourism industry, which is the industry of providing services for everyone that is travelling on their holidays. But generally, when we think about industry, we're thinking about factories, and when we're thinking about industrial development or industrial change, we are generally thinking about factories or factories closing. Okay, a modern industrial development, so if we break it down, it's modern, it's new. An industrial, so it's a factory usually, and the development, so it's something that's been built. A new factory that's been designed to have limited impact on the physical environment. Sometimes you see the word sustainable in there, so a modern sustainable industrial development. Our example is Jaguar Land Rover. How are they a sustainable modern industrial development where they're involved in car assembly? They've got 4,000 solar panels on the roof so that they spend less money and that they use a renewable source of electricity. But you can also see that all around the building there is lots of glass. That's so that they don't have to spend lots of money and waste lots of fossil fuels on lighting the building, and can instead just use natural light from the physical environment. And also you can see some urban greening here, which makes it a pleasant environment for people to be working in, but also improves air quality around the factory. Environmentally sustainable, so thinking about the environment and sustainable, meeting people's needs now without damaging environment for future generations. Think of it as happy tree, happy people, a happy environment and happy people. That's what's being sustainable is all about. Port capacity is the amount of cargo, imports and exports that port can handle in 24 hours. If we increase our port capacity, we can have more imports and exports, then we can have more money for the UK's economy. That will also drive regional economic growth. Airport capacity, very similar. The number of aircraft that can land or depart from an airport within a given time, usually 24 hours. More passengers buying tickets means more money for the economy, but more planes leaving also means more imports and exports can leave the airport in a given time, again leading to an increase in regional economic growth. The North-South Divide. So there is a divide in the UK, generally running from the north of the UK or England to the south of the UK. And generally the simplest way to think of it is the north is generally poorer and the south is generally richer. There are also other elements to the North-South Divide as well. So not only income, whether people are rich or poor, education is generally worse in the north and better in the south, and even life expectancy, due to the many factors that influence people's quality of life. People generally live shorter lives in the north of England and longer lives, healthier lives in the south of the UK. And we can describe these, the North-South Divide, but other regional differences, as regional differences. So the UK is split up into lots of counties or regions. For example, we live in the West Midlands, but we also have London and the South East as different regions, and there will be differences in those regions, in their income, in their life expectancy, and lots of other development indicators and factors of social life. Rural landscape. So rural landscape is an area that is not very densely populated, or not many people live in a small area. So we can see that generally in this whole landscape that we can see here, you might only have about 10 families, probably about 50 to 100 people. And some rural landscapes are experiencing population growth. So our example is South Cambridgeshire. And as you can see, this small rural area, from all the residential housing that is being built up and the loss of greenfield sites, is experiencing population growth. That is having lots of negative impacts on the area, such as petrol prices being really high, increased traffic, and also a problem with managing all of the waste that these people produce, because the current infrastructure and facilities cannot cope. However, there are also positive impacts as well. So for example, South Cambridgeshire is becoming more ethnically diverse. But there are also rural landscapes, usually remote or isolated landscapes, so far away from anywhere, that are experiencing population decline, or the population is going down. The main reason it's going down is because people are leaving for urban areas. So for example, people leave the Outer Hebrides to go to Glasgow on mainland Scotland. As a result, again, there are lots of negative impacts in terms of services closing. So for example, lots of young people leaving mean that there aren't many young people, so schools and services for young people have to close down. But also entertainment and the tertiary sector is affected. So for example, lots of pubs in the Outer Hebrides have had to close because all the young people are leaving and they've got no customers. Road infrastructure. So infrastructure, remember, are all of the services and the physical structures that we need to live our life. For example, gas pipes and electricity and internet infrastructure. When we're talking about road infrastructure, we're generally talking about roads, so motorways, A roads, B roads and smaller roads. Motorways, particularly our smart motorways, so this bit is called a gantry, which helps to manage traffic. But we also have rail infrastructure as well. So that's all the infrastructure, so the tracks and the stations related to rail or trains. One example of rail infrastructure that is changing or is new in the UK is HS2, which is going to connect London to Birmingham, leading to regional economic growth for both of those regions. Trade is the buying and selling of goods and services. When we're talking about countries, we usually call it imports and exports. And trade is a really, really important part of the UK's changing economy. A lot of the UK's GDP comes from trade with other countries. Culture, those are the ideas, customs, behaviours, in other words, the way people live their life. It's made up of food, faith, religion, behaviour, rituals, customs, language, and as the UK's economy changes, culture plays a massive part. Transports, this is taking or carrying people or goods from one place to another. We talked about how important imports and exports are for the UK's GDP, for the UK's economy, and the air, road, rail, and also our shipping or port capacity and all the infrastructure related to them are really important to our economy as well. If we can improve all of that infrastructure, we will grow our economy. Electronic communication are modern forms of communication sent over a phone line or internet connection. For example, an email. An electronic communication has sped up the process of globalization and also sped up economic growth because imports, exports, transactions can happen faster. Economic links, those are how businesses and countries are linked together. Trade is a brilliant example. So for example, if we sell goods to the EU, we would have an economic link with them. And you can see here the trend, the UK's exports are where we send products to. Since about 2009, we have exported more products to non-EU countries, so we've sold more products to non-EU countries than we have to other EU countries. Political links. So political links is when governments from different countries have links with one another or relationships with one another. For example, the UK is head of the Commonwealth, which is a group of countries that are all linked by their past under the British Empire. That gives us links with 56 countries. A really good example of that is the Commonwealth Games, which were held in Birmingham, where those 56 countries all came together to celebrate the Commonwealth, but also improve the economy. So the European Union is an economic, so in terms of money, and political, in terms of government, union or kind of friendship, we can think of it, between 27 countries in the continent of Europe. You can see the countries highlighted in colour here. You can see that the UK isn't coloured in, and that's because the UK left the EU in a process nicknamed Brexit. We still have close political and economic links with the EU, so that doesn't mean we don't trade with the EU anymore, but perhaps trade a little bit less. Finally, the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth is a collection of 56 countries that all work together to achieve economic development. So the idea is that all of these countries get richer. Democracy, so the idea of government, and also peacekeeping as well. So those are the words that you'll need to understand the changing UK economy. Have a look at how you did. If you didn't do so well, come back in a few weeks' time, have another go, watch the video again.